Hey everyone, it's Ro with Rose Wigglers. Excited to talk to you here today. I have switched up my method for today so you can see a little bit more closely in the bins to see what's going on. And I wanted to kind of share with you what I've been trying and what I'm noticing and what I think I'm learning. Excuse my voice, I've been sick for about 5 days, and so I'm getting over it, but I sound terrible. And I have enough physical energy to do this kind of stuff, but not enough to get out there and do my typical gardening, landscaping stuff I do in the day to supplement my income since I'm now officially working entirely for myself, which is exciting. So instead, I am focusing on, I wanted to reset my red wiggler breeder bins that I situated. And so, oh, I shouldn't have pulled this off yet. So I bought 4 pounds of red wigglers from Mimi's Worms, and they arrived happy and healthy and in great shape. They weren't really fully mature, most of them. So we're in, I think, month 2 or maybe 3 now, where they're starting to be mature. And I put a lot of worms in my breeder bins. I was listening to Jane at Rockin' Worms, and she advised, you know, kind of pack them in there a little more. And I was like, well, let me do an experiment and see what happens if I put more worms in my breeder bin than I typically would. I would say typically I would put about 1 pound in a bin like this. These are the mortar trays from Home Depot. But I went ahead and did the full 2 pounds and maybe a little more. And what I'm noticing, I'm working on, this is my third bin now that I'm trying to reset. And I expected with that many happy, healthy worms in there, nice extra moist bedding like they like for breeder bins. I've really been trying to dial in my process for breeder bins because prior to officially becoming a worm farmer and doing this as a business, I wasn't so focused on breeder bins and reproduction. I was just focused on casting production. And so I'm trying to dial in my methods, and everyone's process is going to be a little different based on their context. So, like Jane from Rock and Worm said, I put these probably a little more than 2 pounds, because I think Mimi or Samantha hooked me up when she sent me my worms. I think she always sends a little extra to account for weight loss during travel, which is a wonderful thing. But I've noticed I'm not actually seeing very many cocoons at all. And I should be seeing cocoons by now. So, to give you a background on how we got to this point, you can see I've got my plastic just over on this one side. That's because I've been also experimenting with trying to set my worms up so that we do a bit of horizontal migration, and I don't have to sift so many worms and stress them out. I can just pull them all out, throw them into the new bin, and they won't get stressed, and they'll be able to immediately pick up breeding again. So I kept this side uncovered so it would dry out a little bit so I can sift. It's still not dry enough to sift. That'll come later, but this is where I'm at in the process. Let me flip this around. So now we have, this is my side. You can see where my feeding zone was here. Because I always try to use shredded cardboard on top of my feeding zone to help me know where I last fed. It works pretty well. And so as I lift this, you're going to see tons and tons of worms that have moved over to this side to get to the new food. And the idea is they're going to leave behind a bunch of processed bedding, some castings, and a whole bunch of cocoons. And there will still be worms in here that I have to sift out. But my goal is to get more of them over here before the breeder bin reset day comes. So if I can do this about 5 days ahead of time, that seems to be the trick to get a lot of them to move over this way. So let's see what we got under here. Let me fluff up the bed that I prepared. This is prepared bedding in this bin for my new breeder worms to get started. So I mixed this up a few days ago. I've been letting it sit and let the moisture balance out and all that. So That's fluffed. Now, you pull this back. This was the feeding zone, remember? And you can see, I mean, it is just absolutely loaded with happy, healthy worms. These worms are definitely mature. I see lots of clitellums. So I know that they're mature enough to be breeding, but they're not, I'm not seeing a lot of cocoons in this bin. So that leads me to believe that they are actually feeling overly crowded at this point, and worms will self-regulate and they will actually stop reproducing if they feel like there are a lot of worms in their space and maybe there would be a scarcity of food or resources, and so they stop reproducing. Here's some more. I mean, this bin is just loaded, right? And so what I am going to do is I'm going to take all these worms, this entire feeding zone, and the bedding that they've moved over to. I'm going to put this in the new breeder bin that I have set up. However, I'm going to fairly drastically reduce the population that's going into this new breeder bin. And I'm going to see if it helps. And this is how I'm going to do that. So here's some more worms from the breeder bin. They're going into their new breeder bin, which I've also already set up with food. I gave them some watermelon and some eggshells and some coffee grounds and kelp meal, and then just lightly dusted the top layer with a little bit of ground up cornmeal. Just a little bit. You don't want to overdo it with the cornmeal. So I'm getting all these worms out of this feeding zone into here. Now, as far as this new breeder bin goes, that's it. I'm going to stop. I put the new date on here so I know when was the last time I reset this bin. And I will reset it again 21 days from now, maybe 19 or 20 to help me be on the safe side, because if I miss a day, then all the cocoons seem to start hatching, and that's its own kind of situation to deal with, trying to get all those little babies out. So this new breeder bin is now set up. I'll cover it up. I'll put it away in its tray. Now this bin, this is the old bin. Watch what happens. I'm going to fluff this bin, and you're going to see how many worms are still in here. Like, this is so many worms. So, you know, I think I just overdid it a little bit with my taking Jane's advice. Thank you, Jane, for your advice. Jane knows her stuff. I really love watching Jane from Rockin' Worms YouTube videos. You should definitely check out her channel. I'll try to remember to tag it in here. But look how many worms are still in this breeder bin, and yet it's nice and moist. It's all the things that you want a breeder bin to be. It's full of worms, but I'm not seeing cocoons. Oh, I see one cocoon, but oh, there's two. So they're starting to do their thing, but I should be seeing way more cocoons than this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these worms that are remaining, still quite a few, you just grab like another little handful and throw them into the new bin just for good measure. This is how I measure things, by the way. This is why I'm not a baker. And so all these worms, I'm going to set them up. I'm still going to sift this. I'm going to let this bedding dry more so I can sift it, so I can get any of the cocoons out of here that are in here. But then I'm going to set this up as its own bin. So essentially, more or less, I'm dividing one breeder bin into two different breeder bins. So I just wanted to fill you in on this process. Let me know what you think. If you have advice with this, if you've experimented with this before, if you have any recommendations for what I should be doing differently. I know the standard recommendation amongst worm farmers that I've seen is 1 pound per square foot of surface area. And so this is approximately 2 square feet. And so I would think 2 pounds would be good, but it seems like there's too many. So let me know. And remember, until next time, healthy soil, healthy plants, happy worms.